losses and what alarming trends we saw from this team. And after that, we talk about the NFL, starting with the Niners and their how do I put it, a mass exodus during free agency. Ben breaks down all the moves and what this means for the Niners moving forward. And on the other side with the Philadelphia Eagles, the Eagles lost a lot of players themselves, but I talk about how the Niners and the Eagles are kind of doing the same thing, but the Eagles couldn't be in a better position versus the Niners. So we break down everything around the league. Let's talk about it. With that being said, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan-Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Reds. Ben, how are you, brother? How you doing?
You know, I'm hanging in there. It's been an interesting week, but you know, the boy lives closer now, and I've seen you a few times since then, so I can't be too mad.
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been a nice vibe being so close. I'm glad you got to meet the pup. Ben got to meet my huge German Shepherd Milo, so that was a lot of fun. Made a good first impression. And also, random topic. We're recording on March 12th. It's Issa Mar's birthday, my sister's birthday. Happy birthday, Issa. Love you so much.
Happy
Can't
birthday.
wait. You'll be down here in about 10 days, so I'm excited to see you. So that'll be a lot of fun. So just want to give her a shout out. So Ben, as we talked about in the intro, there's a lot of stuff that unfortunately we have to talk about because it's been a weird, like you said, it's been a weird week. It hasn't been I don't think what we had hoped for or what we expected from all of our sports, I think. So let's start with the Kings. I want to talk about, they went 1-2 in the last 3 games that we were hoping for. They had 2 of these games at home. They played the Spurs, the Clippers, and the Knicks. And there was some positives to start this 3-game stand when when San Antonio came into town. Fox's homecoming, we heard the boos, but we got the video. They did the thing for him, the tribute, and at the end of the day, we destroyed them. It wasn't even close, and Foxy picked up where he left off in Sacramento by missing a bunch of shots here. So it really wasn't. It was that plus, Levine popped off, had an awesome game. It was kind of like the game we were hoping for. You're like, oh man, maybe our guy beats the guy who, left. So this was I was really happy with the results of that game. I think we won by 19 to 20 points, and it was a really great showing at home. What did you think about the game?
Yeah, it was nice to see the Kings not really, sit down and just let another team walk into their building and destroy them when we expect them to win. And so I was happy to see the outcome of that game, and it really gave me like this sense of, I guess, closure for lack of a better, phrase, because we saw Zach LaVine just completely take over the game. And he had, 3 or 4 shots over De'Aaron Fox in particular that just shouldn't be going in, but they went in. And it was this feeling of like, Fox didn't do that kind of stuff here in Sacramento. He did a lot. He did a lot of stuff here, and he was a special player here. But the kind of things that we're seeing Zach do from time to time, it's special. And to see him do what he did in that game and just operate the way he was, to see, DeMar DeRozan kind of carry the previous loss into the next, into the next game against San Antonio and really, open up the books. It was nice. It was refreshing to see us kind of blow out a team from start to finish.
Yeah, so, all the positive vibes from that win, we were really excited to take that into our next game against the Clippers. And honestly, that was a close result. The Kings ended up losing in overtime off of a Kawhi Leonard last shot. And, there were, I think for that game, because we're going to talk about the Knicks game here in a second, but like that set the tone. I do think, it's, the first night of a back-to-back. It's on the road. You get to go home after this. And I honestly thought for the majority of this game, the Kings were outplaying the Clippers. And I feel like that's been a growing trend again, is where these guys are doing really well, hanging with the punches, weathering the storm. But then at the end of the day, maybe it's a couple missed calls that were a little weird. Maybe it was the momentum from all the stoppage from them doing the challenges. There was a lot of challenges in this game. So I wonder if, maybe momentum got ruined. But at the end of the day, we lost. And it was It was a tough one to lose because, we talked about it, from a playoff perspective, the Clippers are right above us in the standings at eighth. That would have helped us tie because we were 2-1 against them before entering that game, right? So we could have been able to split the series. That would have helped for tiebreakers. Would have been huge. And to lose like that in overtime was really, really tough. And it was tough because like Kawhi finished over Keegan Murray, who was dominating the game defensively on both sides of the ball. They tried to throw different things at Harden, but in the fourth and the fourth quarter specifically, he was really kind of just ISOing whoever was guarding him, whether that was Keon or Jake LaRavia, and he was getting fouls. He was making his shots. He was getting to the rim. It was kind of unfortunate. I was like, put Keegan on Harden, because the few times we saw that, they ended well. But yeah, it was a frustrating loss. I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it on the head. It was frustrating because, with a minute and a half left, you're up 7 points. And at that point, you just need to play some smart basketball. And this is, a kind of a alarming trend that we're seeing this Kings team, fall into here, where they will control the game or control, a set amount of time in a game and really kind of open up the game for themselves, give themselves some room. And they will settle into, these shots that just, it doesn't make sense. It's like, why would you don't need to take that kind of a shot right now. And, I'm going to talk about DeMar DeRozan and kind of pick on DeMar here for a minute, because all season long, I'll give him credit first. All season long, we've been going to him as our closer. Even when Fox was here, DeMar was the guy who was closing out these games more consistently this season. And so down the stretch, it makes sense to go to DeMar DeRozan as often as we do. But I get this sense from DeMar that he knows he has that green light in crunch time. And so he's kind of just willing to take any shot that he can get. And sometimes it's not the best shot. And the one that, I'm talking about is we were up, I want to say it was 2 points with maybe 30 seconds left. And this is in the fourth quarter. And he pulls, he just waves off the pick, the screen, and says, this is an ISO, and just does like 2 dribble moves up to the 3-point line after dribbling for, 16 seconds essentially. And I get you're closing the game, but, dribbles up to the 3-point line and just hooks up this contested three that, hits backboard first and then rimming off. And if you got 2 points there, it's pretty much GG's. At least it's going to make it more difficult. And obviously, there was also a massive call that was, I want to say, the incorrect call, but the NBA came in and backed up their terrible call there. But the 3-point shot that clearly, there was contact on DeMar DeRozan's wrist, right? That would have essentially iced the game. That would have put us up by a good margin with little time left. So it was a frustrating finish. And so then to go to overtime, because Zach LaVine misses that fourth quarter shot, to go to overtime and just do more of the isolation basketball that, it just wasn't going to work at this point. We didn't have that momentum. The Clippers had the momentum. They had gotten the stops in the fourth quarter. They put themselves in a position to extend the game. They started hitting shots right out the gate. Kawhi made a quick 3 to open it up. And that kind of thing, it makes it difficult. So it was a really frustrating loss in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, you made a good point about DeMar at the end there. I did think this was a weird game too, because I was upset with the way it finished because of the fact that I felt like we should have gone to LaVine a little bit more to close the game. He obviously got the last shot, but you're right. Like during that fourth quarter, there was possession after possession where DeMar's he's almost like, instead of them running a play, and like he's just like going around and doing an assignment specifically, he's getting as close to the ball as he can. Whoever has it on top, he's like, so I can get the ball and then do my thing. But then like if Zach touched it, then he would back off. But even if it was a possession where like, oh, we're going to give it to Zach here, he's still inching forward and like saying like, I'm here, you can give me the ball. So I do think like there is an element of like that. I feel like, I don't know if the ending would have been different, but LaVine was the hotter hand that evening. And I thought Levine especially was finding ways to get into the paint in a way DeMar just couldn't. And Kawhi was the one mainly guarding DeMar the whole time. At the end, there was a mix of Kawhi and Derrick Jones Jr., but Zach LaVine was beating his matchup for the entirety of this game. So it felt a little weird. And that's like, I think the dynamic this might have been the thing they were talking about in Chicago, right? Like
Yep.
maybe this is the dynamic that that at the end of the day, LaVine is a veteran, but DeMar is the veteran. He is the guy who's been here longer and technically has that kind of one leg up on LaVine in a way. But I do think LaVine does defer to DeMar sometimes a little bit more than he should. And we'll talk about this a little later on how maybe, this team is going to, need a different approach with this particular roster or with the way they want to build their roster moving forward. But for me, that was a good point because that was kind of my main takeaway, that I was like, I really wish LaVine could have been the one to kind of take over in the fourth.
Yeah, and I mean the best version of the Sacramento Kings is the version that's moving the ball and that's spreading that wealth, right? I mean, when Keon Ellis is getting involved on the offensive end, we're cooking. And like that's kind of opposite of what you'd think. You'd be like, well, we must be struggling if we've got to, rely on Keon to knock down shots. Well, no, because the kind of offense that the Kings run, you get open looks if you run it properly. Obviously, with Domas out, it's tough to do. There's definitely an adjustment there, right? And we're starting to ramp up. We'll see him again soon, and I don't think there's going to be much of a growing pain to get him incorporated. But it's an adjustment for sure. But the fact that they refused to move the ball in any way, shape, or form, like it was 2-man game, sure, that's great. But the 2-man game turned into just a pick and a pop. There was no dishing and there was no, drive inside and kick it out, which is something this team has figured out how to do really well lately, especially when they win games. So, you got away from things that were working.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I'll make this point after. I think I want to press on to the next game here. Where obviously this is going to be quick because the Kings got blown out. And, second night of a back-to-back, they just played overtime. It was a gut-wrenching loss. The beginning of the game, shots weren't falling. And some shots were falling for New York that, were just a little unfortunate going on. And I wasn't I was able to catch the first quarter, but fortunately for me, I didn't, I got to miss the bloodbath. So for you, what was your main takeaways from the Knicks game outside of like, maybe this was just, they just needed to flush this one and move on?
I put out a tweet on X. Can you call it that? A tweet on X? I don't know. I posted something on X. There we go. That it was during I believe the first or second quarter. It was early on, right when the Kings, started really falling behind. And I was like, this team looks physically and mentally exhausted from the night before. And that was 100% the case with this Clippers game. And, with this Knicks game. This was a team who came into this building shorthanded. The Knicks didn't have their best player in Brunson. And you would think at that point that the Kings should have a really good shot. But, we can get into whether this is a scheduled loss or whatnot. But the reality of the situation is you're gunning for a playoff spot. You're gunning for a play-in spot. You're battling for position there, right? And every win counts, every loss counts, and every single minute of every game has that much more importance because you didn't give yourself that cushion that we talked about months ago before the season even started, us having to have, this cushion prior to this month of March, this just absolute hell of a schedule we have left. They haven't set themselves up. They haven't given themselves that cushion. So you don't have that room for error. You let the Knicks come into your building and, big brother you for all intents and purposes. And it was rough. The Kings did put together a little bit of a run there in the in the third quarter. They cut it to about 10 points, but it never got within single digits again. We didn't see single digits since the first quarter. And that's alarming when you think about a team that all season long has fought back in a majority of games that they have gone down largely in. And it's a large sample size that we've seen this team fall behind like that in. In this game, it just didn't feel like they could muster that, that energy. And you really had to think it had something to do, if not a lot, and all to do with that Clippers game.
Yeah, and I think on top of, again, longer game, And then in that game, in the Knicks game, you didn't have Laravia either. And I
Right.
do think the Knicks were able to capitalize on our lack of size that we were able to throw out. So then, I think over these past couple games, like the past 2 or 3 games, we really have kind of been feeling the Domas loss. I think at first that wasn't as much of a, Jonas was still relatively fresh, coming off the All-Star break. I didn't think that, I think now he wasn't really getting those starter level minutes, and he's being asked to do a lot more than he would be going up against starters versus coming in to wreck the bench from when we got him in the trade. So I do think having Domas back, will really help the, the we were missing a key piece. Domas is our best guy in the sense of like how we want to run our offense through him and his consistency, and to be able to have the physicality of both big men at any given time, it has been really important because Jonas has shown his value, but I think he's just getting worn a little thin. So Domas, in my opinion, couldn't come back soon enough. And I think we are struggling a little bit with the injury bug, a couple guys getting nicks here and there. And it's been causing a little bit of disruption. Like these guys can hang on, but if we're missing, we're missing 1 or 2 guys, and we were missing Monk for the past couple games. He was in the Knicks game, but he wasn't in the Clippers game or the Spurs game. So like guys have been coming in and out of the lineup. So it's been it's again, just a slight adjustment period, and that kind of disrupts the flow. So I do think that's been getting in the way a little bit. Um, and I think, like you said, we're not building a cushion. I think we're setting ourselves up to be in exactly the same spot we were last year. Um, we're going to be ninth potentially, and then have to, beat whoever's in 10th, because we're kind of in that. I think we're kind of that team that we can hang with good teams, but we're not beating good teams right now. But anyone that's under us, we're beating the snot out of. We're beating the teams we should, but not the teams that we need to beat.
Yeah,
So
it's a really good point. So that brings me to this next part here that I don't know if you saw this. Chris Biederman, he's a reporter for the SAC-B. He does a lot of reporting on the Sacramento Kings, and he posted something on X that says the Kings are about to fall to 12-21 against teams who are above 500, which is worse than every team in the top 10 of the West standings except the 10 seed Mavericks, who are 13-24. So, you're beating teams that you should, which, yeah, heck yeah, like that's great. We love a consistent King, right? But you're losing these games against teams that are, jostling for the same positions you've been going for all season. And that's just extremely alarming to me, especially when you're talking about wanting to be a playoff team and talking about wanting to accomplish these goals that you had set prior to the season. You're not setting yourself up well.
yeah, so part of this, you addressed this. You wanted to bring this up kind of in the rundown. You know, we're kind of still in the same place, and we haven't really gotten a consistent lineup. But we have seen enough of this team now where we kind of feel like there might be a specific style that they play. And I wanted you to break down kind of what you think, maybe the style of play or the identity of this team. And like whether you think it's sustainable or not, or if this roster really isn't kind of built for what they're trying to do.
I think the identity is still hard to identify. It's hard to say exactly what this team, wants to do on a night-to-night basis, but you're getting a clearer picture as time goes on. And one of the reasons that Mike Brown was, rumored to have been let go was, we talked about wanting guys like John Collins and Brandon Ingram in the past, right? Well, he supposedly is rumored and been reported on that he shut down those trades from happening because he viewed John Collins and Brandon Ingram and other players similar to as low IQ players, and wouldn't fit necessarily what the Kings were trying to do. And so, fast forward a number of months, Mike Brown's out of office. Obviously, the trade for Zach LaVine happens. You got to get rid of De'Aaron Fox, right? And you've got now 2 players who have feasted on isolation basketball for the better part of their careers. in DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. And you're pairing them with a center who loves to move the ball. He's going to get 15 rebounds a game, yeah, but he also wants the ball in his hands and he wants the ball to move through him. And if, we've watched this team now for a number of years, and ever since Domas came in against that first game against the Timberwolves, we saw a totally different style of basketball being played in Sacramento, and everything was being run through the center. And we're getting away from that again. And this is now where I'm starting to feel like I'm losing a bit of faith in this team, because yes, the wins that we're getting are awesome, but they're coming with DeMar putting up, 25 to 30 shots, and Zach LaVine putting up, 20 shots, 20 to 25 shots, and Malik Monk having X amount, right? And when you think about it, you're like, well, that's good. I mean, our best players are getting the ball in their hands and they're going to the rim, right? Well, they're getting back buckets. Well, how they're getting buckets is the part that's alarming. It's so much isolation basketball, and you're not having this two-man game, and you're not having these dribble handoffs that you've been running through Domas for these years now. You're having isolation ball where you're putting Domas on the low block, getting some kind of a switch, right, so that he has the advantage, and you've got, a pull-up jump shot or spinning to your left against, whoever the defender is if you're DeMar DeRozan, right? And, it feels like a good shot and it looks awesome, but the reality is, against good teams with size and teams that know how to defend you, like the New York Knicks, you're going to get blown out by 30 points. And so I'm a little nervous to think about what the rest of the season holds, considering who the teams, that we've got to play ahead of us. We still see Cleveland twice. We see Boston again. We see the Knicks again. No, we don't see the Knicks again, but we see a number of top teams. We've got the second toughest schedule left. Like, it's not going to be easy, and this style of ball might not last.
Yeah, so I guess with that, I guess what I wanted to discuss when it comes to that style, because I agree. I think it's just too much isolation. There's too many guys who need the ball to make something happen. And I think that, now we're seeing kind of the best of, Zach LaVine. He's warmed up. He's gotten used to Sacramento a little bit. He's playing a lot better ball than he was when he first got here. So I believe in the piece that Zach LaVine is, right? So when I think long term, I think that like the issue might be that we are going to need to get creative and reconstruct our roster in a way that, benefits a guy like Zach LaVine, to maybe put more players around him that can allow him to get the ball more in different spots. And I do think that that might come in the form of getting rid of some of the players we have, say Malik Monk or DeMar DeRozan, in search of players who fit better. Because you see, again, we talked about it, we see different lineups when it's Zach LaVine, DeMar, and Keon, or, or Markel, or even Devin Carter, like guys who can help facilitate for one of these guys to kind of help them get into their ISO spot. So then it still requires ball movement, but then it gets you to the ideal spot. So it's like, I think we need more of that if we want to buy into the Zach LaVine experience moving forward. And again, if it's not, it sounds simple, but I honestly don't know all the logistics of it yet. That would have to be an off-season thing when we find out more. But I wouldn't be opposed to, kind of restructuring this particular group, because we had the team had a vision for it coming into the season, and this vision, there's no clear path anymore. We need to find, and we need to create an identity again. And I think these group of guys, like when fully healthy, when Domas comes back, when Laravia comes back, when these guys, if they can stay fully healthy for the remainder of the season, they're going to have a puncher's chance in the playoffs, because they're a talented team. On paper, this is a really good roster, so they will have a chance, so long as everyone healthy. But if we're missing guys, I just don't see it happening this year. So that's just kind of like what I've been thinking. This feels more like okay, let's see what, we may just have to power through the rest of the season, see what happens, and then next year we can really start to figure out what our plan is. But that sucks, because now we're just kind of stuck in no man's land as a fan. And, we're just kind of trying to get to the play. At this point, I'm just trying to see if we get to the plan so we can just get these things ramped up, because that's just what the energy the team's given us too. So that's just how I feel about that too.
Yeah, so let's talk about these upcoming 3 games here. We've got a massive one tomorrow night against the Warriors, and it's in Golden State. Which the Kings have won there before. It's not impossible. You can do this. But let's talk about this new look Warriors for a second, because they're terrifying right now. They've lost 1 game since getting Jimmy Butler. And essentially every game Steph has looked good, but he hasn't looked great, and they're still finding ways to win. And that, to me, sounds and feels like a well-balanced roster, which when I think about the Kings against a well-balanced roster, it doesn't normally bode well. So this is a big game, Marcos. What do we need to see tomorrow from the Kings in order to go in and steal a win?
Well, a lot of this is going to depend on if we do have Domas, right? And we still, I don't know if anything's come out yet, but when we saw earlier today, they said he was a full participant in practice. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to play, but that does increase his chances. So having him would be huge, because I think the Warriors, what they've done so well now, they kind of had their own diamond in the rough at center with Quentin Post, their rookie. He's been able to shine for them in a big way and allowed them to play this 5-out offense to make the most of Steph and all these shooters. So I do think that that element on top of the Jimmy Butler addition has made them such a tough opponent. And I think for us to combat that, we need to be the physical team. We need to pressure them the whole time, and we need to get in their grill and try to disrupt their rhythm, because they can be a physical team, but the Warriors are a finesse team, a timing team. We're gonna get to our spots. We're gonna run, and we're gonna get to our spots because you guys won't be able to keep up with us. But if you throw them off their timing, if you get in their face, it'll create some problems. I mean, Steph is Steph, so you always hope that he's just kind of off. But I think we just need to be physical, and if we have Domas and Valanciunas in this game, that's going to help a lot, especially with Kevon Looney, who, Domas has been getting the better of him lately, but I still never really like that matchup. But having Jonas on Looney would be a huge thing for me too. And I think that hopefully we're just keeping up with them offensively. We need to hit threes specifically. I think we need to, if we're not hot from 3 tomorrow, where there's no way we're going to be keeping up with them.
Yeah, and I mean this Kings team, while we've been dogging on them all pod here, this Kings team has found some really special things on the defensive end, and those special things are found in some ugly switches and some just hectic kind of style, but it's working. And that's the style that Doug's been essentially drilling into these guys since he took over. He's been wanting them to be gritty. He's been wanting them to be in your chest, play in your chest, but don't argue to the refs when something happens. Leave that for me. Stay your head in the game. I'm gonna stay my head in the rest of everything else. And it's interesting when I've watched this team kind of lock in when they have to get a stop. Obviously, lately these last few games it's been a little hit or miss, but this team has found ways to lock in and get stops. And that, to me, if you can keep this game close towards the end of this, towards in crunch time, last 5 minutes, right, clutch time of the basketball game, if you can keep it close, I think you're going to give yourself a good shot, because we have found ways to defend Steph with Keegan and Keon as a duo, and we found ways to eliminate the outside shooting of the Warriors in the past, and even this season as early as. So it's possible to beat this team. And I think a win in this game would mean everything going into the next matchup against the Suns, which is the next night.
Right. And before we get into that too, it's also one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game of the year in terms of playoff implications. If we win this game, we win the series against the Warriors 3-1. If the Warriors tie us, then we lose any hope of a tiebreaker, because we're already losing to teams like the Clippers and the Wolves. So, that would have been the last hope should the Warriors for some reason slip, or if create a tie with the Clippers and the Wolves. I don't know, they're tiebreakers, but I believe that would help us out a little bit too, at least if we had the same record. So tomorrow's huge. If we end up splitting with the Warriors, it's just going to make our playoff hopes a little bit more tough to achieve, and then we're just really going to have to embrace the reality of hoping that we can hold on for the play-in. Which, if whatever the result is against the Warriors, there's a team directly behind us in the Suns that we will need to keep away from us. And they have a nice roster, but for some reason this season it just has not been working for them. So, but you still have Kevin Durant, you still have Devin Booker. I don't know about Beal. I don't know if he's out for a while, but I haven't seen him in recently. But this team will give you trouble. They have good size. They don't have Nurkic anymore, so they kind of lose a little bit of that, brooding physicality. But I do think that, Kevin Durant, if he gets hot, Devin Booker, if he gets hot, it'll be a tough matchup. And Booker always seems to play well against us. He always seems to wake up for the Kings. So it'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see if it's a response to a Warriors loss or if it's the momentum from a Warrior, from us beating the Warriors. So it'll be interesting to see going into that game what'll happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of what's riding on it for me is and why it's so important to get a win against the Warriors is because you have to ride momentum at this point. You have to find momentum if you want to really stack up against some of these teams down the stretch. And there's ways to build that momentum, and one of those ways is to find a win against the team that you're directly competing with for play-in and playoff chances, and setting yourselves up for something that could be a win at the end of the season when you look at the tiebreakers. So getting this win against the Warriors is going to be massive. Going into Phoenix the next night on a back-to-back and finding a way to get a win. If you can stack 2 wins here or split it 1-1, I'll be okay. I'll feel okay with a 1-1. 2-0, I'm going to feel really good. I'll be really pleased with that. But if you go an 0-2, taking it into, Monday against Monday against the Grizzlies, that's going to be rough.
Mm-hmm. I think when I looked at the schedule, I think there was only really like 6 or 7 teams with records that were worse than us left on the schedule. I could be wrong, but I do think like we don't have many games left, and we've kind of alluded to that it's really just a tough schedule from here on out. So I just think that again, the back-to-back, this is another tough one. And this is a good chance for this team to really, fight through adversity together. They have been relatively successful since coming over. And this is their first kind of little bump in the road since they've been, hitting that win streak. So this is a good chance to embrace a little bit of adversity and hope that they can carry that in. And yeah, because if we're playing the Grizzlies, I know they've been up and down. Ja Morant's like playing one game, he's not playing another. So I don't know what's going to happen there or what they're going through. But the Grizzlies are still up there in the standings, and they're a tough team. And is that one's at Memphis?
No, that one's back home.
That one's at home. Okay, so that'll help a little bit in that sense. And I mean, yeah, it's just going to be tough. I mean, the Grizzlies present a lot of problems. They always play us really well, but it's good matchups between the Grizzlies and us. I think that they're a team that's beatable. You can force them into mistakes. Because they're fast paced and they're a little high flying. Triple J can kind of get a little trigger happy if he sees 1-3 goes, he'll shoot like 8 more in the game. So it's it depends on what version of the Grizzlies you get that day.
Yeah, exactly, and it also depends on what version of the Kings you get, because we've seen a couple different versions. So I like what the Kings are doing from time to time, and I don't like what they're doing, and I think we struggle with the consistencies. But this is still. It's still early. We made a lot of changes at the trade deadline. I know it wasn't, our entire roster by any stretch, but incorporating 3 guys like that and incorporating them into, important minutes for the rest of the season, you're going to have some of these growing pains. So, the keys for these 3 games, I'm looking for physicality. I'm looking for, I need energy. I need that dog energy. I want to see you go out. And, if you want to get in somebody's face and kind of, bring that kind of a, mentality, let's go. Like, if that's what it takes to get this team going, let's do this, because this is possible. I'm going to pull up the standings right now. We're not super far out of it. The Warriors are 3.5 games ahead of us. And, as far as falling out of the play-in picture, we're 3.5 out from that. So we're smack dab in the middle of the play-in. You can go either way here. Like this is still, there's a lot to play for. So I'm looking for this team to really get cooking, to really find something to hold on to. I know these last two losses have been awful. They've not been fun to watch. I can't imagine they're any more fun to be a part of. So I'm looking for this team to bounce back from those and essentially throw away that, the last two games, completely throw them away. Don't think about them. Focus on this next game. Focus on the team in front of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I do think, I believe in this group in the sense that, like, yeah, the record against plus 500 teams hasn't been good this year, but I don't think that they're just going to go out and lose to every team that's above 500. So I do think that they're going to rally and get some good wins against tough teams, and that'll ultimately at the end of, by the end of this run, so long as we make the play in at worst, give us a fighting chance because we would have seen some victories against some tough teams. So who knows? This is a good spot of the road trip. Like, yeah, they're going to be tough teams, but they're not the toughest teams you're going to be seeing in this stretch. So it's going to be this is going to be really important to at least go 2-3 of these next, or 2-1 in these next three. A win against the Warriors on Thursday would be a really, really great start. But it's going to be up in the air, and they just need to limit turnovers, stay aggressive, play with pace, and honestly just bring the physicality, and they got to take these games. They can't just, hope that it comes to them. They really just got to go after it. So I believe that they can. It's just hopefully that we get the best version of them this week. So
Yes, sir. So let's go light the beam.
like the beam. All right, y'all. So we got some fun NFL stuff to talk about. Free agency is kicked off this week, and it was pretty wild for the Niners and the Eagles. So we're going to be right back. We're going to be talking about the Niners. All right, we are back to talk some San Francisco 49ers. So free agency has begun Wednesday. Today was the official day that players who during the legal tampering period of Monday and Tuesday made deals and said, "Oh, I agree to come play for you for X amount of money, whatever." That officially happens today. Guys are signing contracts left and right. Guys are leaving teams left and right. And for the San Francisco 49ers specifically, there's been a lot more leaving than there's been arrivals, Ben. Do you want to kind of address, you really don't have to do like every single move, because I know the Niners have a lot of moves, but I mean, you can address the ones that you really think are, crucial. I know a lot of guys left, it's going to be weird. So I want, what's happening in San Francisco? What is, is there, what do you think the reason is for, that they're in the situation that they're in?
Well, I mean, the reasons, it's pretty simple. This is what happens when you pay a bunch of all pros for a number of years, and go quote unquote all in on a Super Bowl. And your goal is to win the bowl and stack as many of those as you can. And then you do a fire sale at the end of it, or you find your ways out of it, and get back to, kind of a retool rebuild phase. Well, the Niners didn't get those bowls. They didn't have that kind of luck in the last 5 years here, and now they're faced with the mass exodus that has started in this free agency window. So
It's not an exaggeration either. Legit exodus, dude.
wild, dude. I didn't see it coming, and maybe that's on my part, but at the same time, there weren't a lot of people that saw it coming. There weren't a lot of top analysts and top reporters and people around the NFL that could have said they saw this coming. Yes, you expect some of these players to not be here. You expected like a Charvarius Ward to not be here. You expected a Dre Greenlaw to test that market and see what things look like. But as far as what I'm hearing from the front office now and reports coming out about the front office, don't be surprised if there's more. And I'm talking trades. The Jed York came out and essentially, well, he didn't come out. He has essentially put the clamps on his pocketbook, and he's going cold. He's gonna go with an aggressive offseason here, and it's gonna be interesting to see how much money and who they end up throwing that money towards. Because Jed York right now, he had to shed a whole lot of money that he probably didn't expect to have to shed for not winning a Super Bowl, and it's caught up to him. You know, we have 91 million in dead cap space right now, and that's by far the largest number in the NFL. And you know, dead cap space is money that is promised in signing bonuses and you know, end of contract stuff like that. It's the guaranteed monies, right? And dead cap is money that's guaranteed for players that are no longer a part of your team. So Marcos, $91 million for players who are no longer a part of the 49ers. And this is why we see this max exodus, because we're going to be investing in the draft and in young talent that will be healthy. So, you know, what does it look like from an outside perspective? Because I'm trying to keep my head on straight. It's been wild keeping up with all of these, with all these moving pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing some of the guys. You know, real quickly before I go back to you here, shout out to Kyle Juszczyk for putting in 8 years at the 49ers and suddenly being part of that released, you know, part of the release team from the 49ers. I didn't expect that. I didn't really expect to see Aaron Banks go, but that for that kind of money, I get it,
That was
especially.
surprising too.
But that contract was one that this 49ers front office wouldn't be offering right now. And it does alarm me because that's an offensive lineman. And it makes me wonder at that point, you know, do you have a better option on the table? And is that better option in the draft? Is it the 11th pick? You know, what does it look like if you are okay with letting Aaron Banks walk like that? I get the contract, but you know, these things are alarming. So what does it look like from an outside perspective, Marcos?
Yeah, I was considering there was another offensive lineman that went to the Chiefs, right? For you guys too.
Yeah, Jalen Moore.
Yeah, so Jalen Moore, and he was like your top backup
Mm-hmm.
for Trent. And I was like, well, I mean, cool. Like it's like you said, you painted the perfect picture. This team had a bunch of all pros, paid a bunch of all pros to keep everyone around. You get to the Super Bowl, you get to 2 Super Bowls, give yourself an opportunity to take it all, and it just didn't go your way. And now you're seeing the outcome of all of that. And from an outside perspective, you know, it does feel like the Niners, you know, in my opinion, outside opinion, are kind of just taking the L and prepping for. They believe that they're like, listen, we believe in Kyle, we believe in Brock. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be talking about an extension here, going through all of this. This is part of needing to pay Brock, is, you know, to shed all this extra stuff so then they can open the door to allow themselves to pay more. And they, you know, at the end of the day, I I don't think it's such a bad thing for a team to kind of cut their losses and, you know, admit that they were wrong. I do think it's a tough thing to do. It's not the prettiest thing to do. Fans aren't going to love it either. Like, I can only imagine as a fan, like, it must be a little disheartening to know that, like, next year probably won't be the best year. And, you know, it might be, you know, guys might get healthy. You guys might hit in the draft, and you guys might have, you know, with a lighter schedule, you know, fourth place schedule, that's going to help. But like, every year, you know, for the past 6 years, the Niners have been top 2, top 3 in Super Bowl favorites, preseason Super Bowl favorites. And I don't think they're going to be listed. You know, betting odds are probably going to have them as like the 6th or 7th best team in the NFC. And I don't think that's that crazy, given the way the NFC has improved over these past few years, and even just in free agency with some of the movement we've seen. It's going to be tough, and at the same time, this is going to teach you a lot about Brock, Kyle, and these young pieces that are going to be coming in a way. This allows you're in a position of, let's try. You know, everyone knows what we told everyone what's happening. You know, everyone's seeing what's happening. We're gonna go with our young guys, see who hits, and then, you know, try and rebuild a roster from there. Um, I don't hate it. I feel for you. It must be you know, it must be weird. You know, it's a tough feeling. I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean it feels like failure. You know, it feels like you've been gunning for a Super Bowl for a number of years, and this window was was pretty wide open, and each year it was, run it back, run it back, run it back, and build this, build that. And you got to the verge of a Super Bowl, a few times, and you just don't have the luck at that point. And that really is kind of what it boiled down to in a lot of ways. And so it's disheartening. But at the same time, while I totally agree, I think there's an aspect where, yes, you nail it. The Niners probably aren't that competitive this year. Yes, they have a cookie cutter schedule. But it's hard to kind of gauge right now because I don't know what this team's going to do in the draft. I'm going to be honest with you. This draft is going to be a lot of fun for me. I'm going to be diving really deep, probably deeper than I've ever dove into a draft.
Yes.
Because the Niners have got 11 picks in this year's draft. And a lot of those are due to the compository picks. But dude, 11 picks is a lot. And yes, odds are that we probably don't take 11 players. There's probably going to be package a couple, however many rounders to trade back, right? Or to trade up. But how the Niners address the rest of the offseason is going to be how I'm going to gauge this season. Right now, why would I tell you or tell anybody that the Niners are going to be bad or be good when there's still so many months of work to do? And I can't sit here and say that the Niners have accepted defeat when their first move in the offseason was to go get Robert Saleh. You don't go and get Rob Saleh if you're not trying to be, competitive, right?
Right.
Like, if you're going to get a guy like that to bring him back to your defense, you want to build something. You want to continue building something. And I think a lot of this mass exodus too has something to do with that. I think there's been an overhaul of the defense, and I think that Rob's got an idea of how he wants to build this defense. When he got here, we talked about this, Marcos. Kyle Shanahan in that front office gave Rob the keys to the defense and said, build this how you want it. This is your squad. And I think we're seeing some of these decisions boil down to mainly Jed York and his pocket money, but also the decisions of Rob Saleh and who he wants to go forward with. And we're seeing him want to go back to youth. We're seeing him want to invest in players who have that grit, who have that dog, who want to, want to play for something, whether it is money, whether they're on their, early contracts, whether it's a rookie they want to invest in, right? Whoever the case is, they want players in this building who match the 49ers style and match Rob Saleh's style. And this is something that I'm going to be focused on. But Marcos, we have some breaking news.
Breaking news.
The 49ers are signing quarterback Mac Jones to a 2-year, $7 million deal.
Yes, Mac!
They're trading Brock Purdy. I don't know if they're doing that.
That would be crazy.
But, while I say that, bro, Niners fans, brace for anything. Brace for a Brandon Ayuk trade. Brace for a Christian McCaffrey trade. Because these are two guys who are, getting paid almost top dollar for their positions. And they're, with Christian McCaffrey, it's a guy who's kind of coming down from his prime. He's still got probably a good season or two left in him. I believe he does. But you got to start thinking, does it make sense to shift away from that and really rebuild here and get, some of our money back in our pocket? And, with all the reports coming out with Jed York, I just can't help but think that this 49ers team isn't going to be trading one, if not both of those guys. And that's something to watch too with Purdy, knowing the amount of money that they've got, potentially to be paying him. And that rumored 45 million or reported 45 million, turns out it wasn't true from what I understand. There hasn't necessarily been an offer extended to Brock yet. So that's another situation that you've got to kind of watch, because if we go down this path here and we're not hearing anything about Brock Purdy and we're getting farther and farther in the offseason, it's going to be a little concerning, especially if the move is to pay Purdy. Like, why haven't you done it by now? And if the move isn't to pay Purdy, why haven't you, made a trade? Why haven't you done this or done that or announced that, he's going to be playing on, you're going to franchise tag him? would be wild to me. I don't think you can do that, but the Niners do
Yeah,
think. And this is
not this
an
year.
interesting Niners team right now.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think for the Brock Purdy of it all for his contract. The question is, I don't even know if it's as much of. I wonder if they're asking him, you know, hey, you've only, we understand that you've made, you know, nothing thus far financially. I wonder how much of it is like, hey, can you play one more year on your final year of your deal, and you know that money that I mean, even if they signed him this year, the money wouldn't technically kick in until later. But if they even wanted to kick that can down the road and pay Brock Purdy later to extend a potential, hey, let's get guys in the building window, they might just say, hey, could you play this last year on, this really weak contract, and maybe we do franchise tag you and continue to build this team. And then when, it's time, then we can sign you to that max contract when we have the roster around you to make it, to complete the team. I don't think that's like going to happen. I do think they're going to sign him because that's usually how it goes. But it's like there's always a possibility of like that's what the Cowboys did to Dak. That's what it's one of those things where like it's happened before. And given the fact that Jed York, like you had mentioned, seems to be the one kind of taking back his kind of, he's like, I'm kind of running the ship again. Um,
Which is not a good thing, by the way.
that's right. Last time that happened to the 49ers, that wasn't the best time for them. So this is, it's got to be weird. It's got to be a little, I would guess, alarming.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, it's a weird situation. I just like, it sucks to see it.
Yeah, and if I was Brock Purdy, bro, no, I'm not playing another year without an extension. My elbow got blown out one year. I've been suffering an injury. It seems like every single season. Nah, pay me. Like that's
Fair.
if I was Brock Purdy, that's what I would be saying. And to be honest with you, I'm not gonna sit here and for the last year and a half been Brock's biggest fan, and then all of a sudden be like, oh no, don't pay Brock Purdy. No, you pay Brock Purdy. He took you the distance twice. Like he is a capable quarterback, and he's absolutely somebody that this Niners organization wants in their team. But it's got to come at X price, and that's going to be the tough part because he's got NFC Championship experience. He's got Super Bowl experience. This is experience in his rookie contract that he got so early in his career that's so valuable and that's so overlooked by so many people. It's
Mhm.
If I was Brock Purdy, no, I'm not playing my last year like that. I'm extend me right now. I've
Yeah.
deserved it.
Yeah, it's the Jalen Hurts argument, right? Like, people wonder, like, oh, why would you pay Jalen Hurts when everyone in Philly kind of felt like, oh, we can win with this dude, and then he ends up taking them to distance 22. We're like, oh, we can win with this dude. Okay, let's go. Like, now the expectation's been set. I think Brock has, you know, last year was just has been based off of his numbers. Last year was an outlier year. So the question is, will he be able to, number one, stay healthy, and will he be able to continue? Who do they put around him, and will they stay healthy? So Brock deserves the money. I'm on your side where Brock deserves the money. I was thinking about the other side of things and what could, the alternate reality, but I do think the Niners will end up paying him. I think, otherwise you wouldn't have let, you know a lot of these key guys who are a part of your system go. If you didn't want to just reset and say, hey, we'll pay you now, this is the cheapest you're gonna be. you know the longer they wait to pay Brock, the more they will have to pay him. That's been the story of every team that waits to pay their guys. Look at the Cowboys, look at the Bengals. Now they're stuck in the situation where they held off, and now you're paying the top of the dollar market. So if the Niners take care of Purdy this offseason, I just don't think they're going to get it done soon. I think with all of the stuff that's been going on, I just don't know if, like, maybe they're focusing on getting everything cleared out first, and then they're like, okay, now let's go, and then they can do it, July, August, or whenever they want to start signing them.
Yeah, and we'll see. It's hard to tell with this team. I mean,
Yeah.
last was crazy and up in the air, and we didn't really know how that was going to shake down. And, I thought that Brandon would be traded and then he wasn't traded. And it was a wild situation. I don't think things are going to shake down the same way, but, we could see some similarities as the offseason progresses here. But, like I said, just don't be surprised if you see the Niners make a big trade. And I'm not talking about, trading for a big name player. I'm talking about trading like a Brandon Ayuk or a Christian McCaffrey and flipping that for, like a second, third rounder, and or even first rounder if you could do it, and just essentially trying to set yourself up for the future, because 91 million in dead cap, this year, and I think it's 21.5 next year, and then you're kind of free of it. So this year, like I said, I'm not going to call it a throwaway year, but this could be what's considered a developmental year. And this could be the kind of year where you invest in the draft and you invest in these key pieces that that you believe you can, build your next, team off of. You invest in them and you let them play this season out and go through the ebbs and flows of it, ultimately to get into the next year and have a better shot at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the right way to do it. They need to, they paid premiums at tough spots, and now they have to kind of reshuffle the deck and figure out where do they want to prioritize their next set of guys. This is the new era of the 49ers. This is it. This is the Brock Purdy era officially, of he's going to be, the most, important name on your roster that you're paying big money to, so this was the Niners believe they found their guy. So hopefully, things go well and that they're able to build, effectively and draft and hit on their picks. So that'll be huge.
Exactly. So one last topic here before we shift over to Eagles, and that's a thank you, Deebo Samuel. Now, obviously last week, we knew the trade, we knew it happened, it went down, we talked about it, but I didn't give a proper thank you, and Deebo did. And for anybody who, who hasn't read for whatever reason for Deebo's, thank you letter to the organization, the fans, the players, etc., or anybody who just, wants kind of like wants to see what a true thank you letter is, go out and read it, because it's really incredible. And you hear Deebo in the way that he's talking, or, essentially writing. You hear everything the way it sounds like Deebo, it feels like Deebo, and you really started to get the memories of him when he was drafted here and the rookie year going to the Super Bowl. And you see all this whole career play out from this kid who started off with nothing, and it was so special. So shout out Deebo. Gonna miss you. Go off on the Commanders, beat the crap out of the Eagles, please. Like, seeing them be successful at this point. No, but yeah, I would have felt wrong not coming on here and saying thank you to Deebo, especially for such an amazing farewell that he gave.
Yeah, that's so cool. Then, I think as a fan, you can always appreciate a player who truly, gave their all to the team and to the city. And, listen, we know how much he wanted it. He wanted to bring a Super Bowl here, and, and plenty of players want that during their careers. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. So, he did so much for them, and I'm happy that, that was how it ended. That's a great ending and a really classy way to go. So, shout out Devo. That's awesome. All right. So let's push on over here to the Eagles. Just like, I wouldn't say just like, but a little bit like the 49ers, the Eagles have lost a lot of crucial, important pieces from last year's team. And we wanted to start the conversation with the Niners because it's kind of a segue to how these teams have really kind of had similar off seasons, but we couldn't be in further different positions, I think. Like, obviously the Eagles got back to the Super Bowl and won, and they were able to now cement this kind of new era of, okay, we were able to do it, and we invested all this money in this offense and this, and we switched the coaching staff, all this nonsense. We believed in the defense and went with young guys, and it worked. Like, now in the aftermath of it, just like the Niners, the Eagles are losing key players. And, 5 defensive players. You got Joshua Milton-Williams, Darius Slay, CJ Gardner-Johnson. We just traded him. So we lose and Oren Burks went to the Bengals. So like we lose a lot of those were all guys who participated and were huge pieces to the Super Bowl roster. But the Eagles, I think, are a little bit different because it was almost like the Eagles last year. The Eagles were the best roster in the NFL. They had an embarrassment of riches. They had guys who could at every position who had and their backups came in and played well when they needed to. Like there, no one. The Eagles didn't miss a beat last year, and this is what happens when you win the Super Bowl: is that players are going to get poached. And shout out to the guys who got paid and made their money. A lot of these Eagles guys made their money, so like I'm really happy for them. Um, but I'm also confident in how this team is built. And we re-signed Zach Bond and extended Saquon. I don't know about the Saquon extension, how that's going to go 3 years down the line, but we'll address that when we get there. But Zach Bond was the decision that they made, and they traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson to get Kenyon Green, the offensive guard from Houston, who has struggled and is not that great, but he's a young piece. And I think the difference with the Eagles is we're seeing them be kind of quiet because they're in a position where, the reason they would trade an impactful player like CJ Gardner-Johnson, because like after the trade, that kind of shocked me. I was surprised. I was like, oh, I didn't think of, there was a few guys I was like, okay, yeah, like we could lose CJ. But I was also like, he was good. Like he was an important part of the roster. He's a great locker room guy. But the Eagles traded him. I think it was because they had to kind of make a tough decision on certain positions in which they're going to say, hey, we trust that Vic Fangio, we trust that Jeff Stoutland will be able to plug and fill these holes with whoever we decide to put in that spot. So we invested a third round pick in Sidney Brown. Maybe we might draft a safety. We might draft, a tight end in the draft. It depends now because we might be shedding Dallas Goedert's contract here soon. And we put him out to, we threw him up for a trade to see if anyone will, trade for him. And if someone does trade for him, we save $15 million in cap space. So it benefits us to shed some pieces of this Super Bowl winning roster and still bank on the fact that, yes, the Commanders, made some moves. The Bears got better, teams improved, but you would still think that if they matched up with the Eagles today, the Eagles would still have the better roster of the teams around them. So I do think that that's the credit to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. The Niners, with Jed York saying, hey, I'm closing my pocketbooks because I've spent all this money before, because that didn't work out for them. Jeffrey Lurie is the opposite. He's like, here's my pocketbook, go crazy. Like, you guys will have the resources. And, you see that with a lot of teams is, you are at the mercy of your owners. You are at the mercy of the people who, whose money that, is being spent. So, when these teams hit and when these teams actually do accomplish what they want, you really do find yourself in a position where you're going to lose guys, but you still feel really confident. And the expectations are next year, like this team is still talented enough to potentially repeat even with the guys around them, and moves still have to be made. So overall, it's been a weird offseason, bittersweet, because like a month ago, the Super Bowl was played and now all these guys are gone. So it is a little weird to see, but I'm happy for everyone who got a gig somewhere else. That's super great. I can't wait to beat you guys next year.
Yeah. Well, and here's the difference between, the what the Niners have got going and the Eagles is you guys are coming off of a Super Bowl. So you've already got something that every team wants, right? And so you can afford to get a little bit of a, retool. We've used that word a couple of times on this podcast. You guys can retool. And part of that retool for smart teams who want to continue, having these all pros that they can bank on for a number of years is getting high quality players on a rookie contract. And the Eagles are doing something super special right now, especially by getting these compository picks. And they've really set themselves up. As Shefty said earlier today, Adam Schefter, he said that you guys have like 20 picks in the next 2 years, 11 in the first 3 or 4 rounds. Like that's how you set yourself up for success, and that's a long-term thing. And what the Eagles have right now that the Niners don't is you guys have the Super Bowl done. Like, hell yeah, let's go. Now let's let some of these some of these guys walk. Let's move on from some of these other guys. Let's get some fresh faces and fresh contracts in the building that aren't crazy expensive, that aren't, backbreaking contracts, so that we can continue keeping this core together that got us to the bowl. We keep this core together and we try to, if we don't make the Super Bowl this year and win the Super Bowl, that's okay. Because guess what? The year after that, we've got another opportunity to bank in the draft and knock out, hit a knockout gem. So you guys are in a really nice position coming off of a Super Bowl. This is one of the best positions you can be in a lot of ways.
Oh, heck yeah. And, listen, this year is a kind of different approach because there was two philosophies for the Eagles that, they followed for a long time was like, we never pay linebackers and we never pay running backs. And we did both of those this offseason because then we had a rare linebacker and a rare running back. So we had to address this offseason a little differently, which is why we're seeing some of these guys go. But like you said, the Eagles are set up to say, hey, we can afford to lose these guys. We're going to bank that we can recover and fill with, it could be an undrafted guy. It could be a low level veteran. It could be a draft pick. So, but they can come in and we can still run the system that we want to run. And that's their, and it's also a testament to the coaching staff to having a consistent, defensive coordinator. This will be the second year for Vic Fangio. All the studs that dominated last year are still there. Now we're filling in with younger guys and seeing what Vic Fangio can do. And if he was able to pick guys who made sense. And I will believe that Vic Fangio will have a say in any defensive player the Eagles are interested in the draft. I'm sure that's already been discussed with him and Howie. And I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't have traded CJ Gardner-Johnson if Vic Fangio was like, no, I need him to make this defense work. So I do think there's an element of Vic Fangio has his pieces the way he wants, which is why I feel like this is sustainable. And now we just got to hit on our draft picks, which over the past 3 years we kind of really have been. So it's some things have been, we're kind of on a heater, and hopefully that stays, because that, it comes and goes for certain teams. You don't always hit in the draft. That's just not how it works. But the Eagles benefited from doing that. So that'll be the next step. But I mean, it's been a weird offseason. It's been a crazy one. A lot of good to take from it. I'm excited. I still think, like you said, it's hard to say who's going to be good and who's going to be bad based off of what we're seeing now, because none of these teams are complete yet. But the Eagles made the same kind of salary shedding moves to prepare for the future and set themselves up, because they know that at the end of the day, it's a hard reality to pay every single guy. So, we're going to see guys get extended in 2 to 3 years. It's going to be Jalen Carter's turn. He's going to have to be a top 5 defensive tackle. And then Quinyon and Cooper in the same, offseason. That's going to be tough. Like they're going to get top of the dollar because they're top dollar players. And, you can survive off of a core, but that means you have to fill in where you can. So I like where this team is at, but a lot of work to be done, and we'll see what happens in the draft, which I am also very excited for, because draft season's my season. I live for that stuff.
Yeah, you do these insane dives that I don't even understand how you're able to knock some of these, but you've nailed a number of players and for both of our teams, and it's fun to kind of watch you do that, because I've taken some things away from it that I'm going to apply to this, to this pre-draft exercise. And it's going to be a fun episode when we do our draft breakdown and
Yeah.
who we want to see in our mock draft. Right. But yeah, dude, the Eagles have, like I said, they have really set themselves up nicely. They've got these draft picks. They've hit on them every single year. You guys had at least 2 starters as rookies in the Super Bowl.
So we had Quinyon, Cooper DeJean. They were the 2 starters. Offense, no offensive rookie starters. But then Jalix Hunt was a rookie. He played. He made an impact. And I'm trying to think any other rookies. I mean, Johnny Wilson played a play, but then he dropped the ball. So then, after that. But still, key contributors.
And that's my point is these are rookies that were key contributors on the biggest stage. And that just shows the draft experience and being able to hit on the draft as consistently as the Eagles do. This is going to be a nice way to set themselves up for a number of years. So can they continue doing what they've been doing the last, few years and continue this trend of successful drafts? Because if they do, you guys are going to be set for another 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And, we have all the pieces there, so we'll see what happens. All right. So, was there any final thoughts you had before we head out here?
Bang, bang, Niner gang.
That's right.
We'll be
Fly,
back.
Eagles, fly, baby. You will be. Plenty. It'll be light work, dude. It'll be good.
It's
Have
still
faith.
a cutter schedule too. Like we can do this. We can make it to the playoffs and then get rolled. It'll be fine.
There'll be a chance. There will be a chance. And listen, if the Niners make the playoffs next year, which I would still bet on them to do so, it would be, that's a good sign for a setup year. Because even if, your draft position isn't the greatest next year, that's not the goal. Your goal isn't to tank. Your goal is to compete. And the Niners will compete. So we're excited for it.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, this was episode 80 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all you video watchers out there, you can link the links to the descriptions are up above us. For all you audio listeners, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave any comments. Who do you guys think? Are you excited for the draft? Are you worried about either of the Niners or the Eagles? You Kings fans, do you guys think we're actually gonna, make a good run here? We'll see what happens. But it's always fun. We appreciate all the love and support. We're growing with you guys each and every week, and we're so excited now that Ben and I are closer. We've been saying this, more and more stuff is coming down the pipeline. We're trying to get something set up before episode 100, and if we get there beforehand, that's great. But the goal is to get there in the next few months here before football season, and where things are going to be a lot more fun around here. So I'm really excited for that.
Yes, sir.
All right. With that being said, I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
That's right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.